Hi everyone, welcome back to another session of Foglight by Quest database monitoring. Today what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the entire database dashboards and explain how to view the overall health of the database instance, as well how to solve the database mysteries that being usually concerned with most of the database administrators. Now let's talk about the most common database performance mysteries and the typical questions that database administrators have when they are performing their daily tasks. Now, what is important to a database administrator? Is it more with respect to the SQL queries or the SQL statements that consume the highest database time? Or can a database administrator investigate using the historical time-based analysis? Or how to understand the correlation between the database changes and how the database workload, supposedly if an index has been dropped or a parameter has been changed? Or how to analyze the execution plans, which can be quite complicated to understand? Or how to compare between a good and a bad explained plan. Now, database administrators, as you know, are generally concerned about performance tuning. Now, what causes databases to be slow? Is it more with respect to the CPU time, or is it the non-ideal rate events, or is it both of them? It's possible that the total database time that is being consumed by active sessions, but it could also be possible that the overall score for the database administrator that is being important. The DBA is looking to reduce the database time and because of which they want to maintain a good database health. Now, before we get step into solving the problems, you should be aware that Foglight for SQL Server and Oracle comes with a lot of SQL Performance Investigator. Now, what is which is we use it as a SQL PI. Now, the PI tool provides a quite unique multidimensional diagnostic capabilities. It has a lot of advanced analytics around the change tracking, comparing, and explaining the plan features. Now there is an agent configuration which is quite simple to enable as well. The agent can collect the data remotely and it uses embedded repository post the graphs to store the SQL performance data. PI supports all the Oracle and SQL Server versions and configuration. Now let's do a brief overview of Foglight for cross performance database dashboard. Now this dashboard, if you see, will give you a visual representation of all the database in a single plane. Now, if you see from this dashboard, we can also configure the database agents. It covers the entire monitoring process, starting with the discovery of the database instances. At the same time, you can see that the connection which is be associated with these instances, plus the global administration of database agents as well. Now, with SQL PI configured, we also have the ability to perform more in-depth analysis and investigation of an instance activity. For example, let's say, for example, if I'm clicking on one of these Oracle instances, now you go to SQL PI, the performance tree provides access to any of the key dimensions associated with the database activity. Now this is based on polar multidimensional models and an instance view of an instance activity. Now let's say I'll show you some kind of a specifics on the data Oracle database activity and how do you diagnose the issues in the database. So let's talk about how a database can solve these mysteries. The database performance analysis, if you take how it will be working. So let's say a database DBA wants to resolve the performance degradation due to the blocking the lock issues, right? So well, first of all, one should have a kind of an overview of all the database logs. Now, why lock is important? Because database needs to support multi-user applications at the same time. They need to ensure that the data consistency and integrity is there, right? So these will affect the interaction of the readers and writers as well. And every database management system has its own implementation of locking mechanism as well. Now to identify the lock issues, select any of these locked objects. The analysis display will show you all the locks that took place within the selected time range. And in this case, we can have 2 locks within the time range of 8 hours. So you can further drill down to the specifics of the locked objects. For you can drill down to the loaded object, which is the quest from the PPC parameters. It will display the lock trees, including the details of the blocker and the block session. You can also select the blocking history tab. The blocking history tab, for example, in this case will provide the details with the event start date, the instance name, the session ID, the serial number, the status, whether it's in a blocking state or it is in a block state, and whatever is the associated SQL statement for that lock object. Right? Now that we have an information related to a program, the SQL text and the client machine, the database administrator can also investigate the problem from this perspective. So let's take a look how a database administrator can identify the performance degradation due to excessive IO activity. Now to investigate and analyze the IO related rate events, and the statistics, let's say you click on this object IoT. Now this view will give you details on the objects that have high physical or logical reads. The block changes will try to give you the total number of changes that were part of an update or delete operation that were made to all the blocks in the is in the SQL. So how about the DBS will be able to correlate between the database performance degradation and the changes in the environment? So in those kind of scenarios, with SQL PI's advanced analytics, database administrators will be able to track the changes, will be able to correlate them with the database workload. So let's say if I am selecting the SQL statements and go to advanced analytics tabs, the dots on the resource consumption graph will show multiple database changes within the specific time range. Okay, in this case, you can see there are multiple changes around the Oracle configuration. There are around, like you can see, 423 changes, right, around the Oracle schema. And there is a below table that will give you the details with the whatever the time is being specified, the description of the changes, as well as it will show you the category that is in. Now, Foglight clearly gives a deep dive perspective on the SQL performance metrics as well. So, but how the DBA will be easily able to interpret these execution plans and will be able to identify if the SQL statement has been very costly or has been causing any performance issues. So, analyze an execution plan. Let's say you are selecting the SQL statements. Now, take a look at the SQL statement table which is available. Now this will give you all the top SQL statements in the specified time range, which statements have been the most active and the average SQL response time as well. And for investigating further, you can select the view SQL tree text. You can see that whatever is the complete script. To understanding the execution plan, you can click on the analyze plan, and you can view the what is the total cost, CPU cost of the SQL statement in these different perspectives. Let's say, for example, the plan details, operation analysis, and the object analysis. Now the plan details and the object and operation analysis tabs that will give you the which is the cost associated with that operation and what is the object name. Now the object analysis tab will give you further details on the object name, the metrics on the blocks, the number of rows that has access, and the size of the data the query has access. Now let's take it, we will go step further. Now let's say we want to understand how can an DBA will be able to understand the performance degradation due to the execution plan changes. Now DBS will be able to compare the execution plans for the different time range by selecting the compare plan. It will give you the DBA a plan from a different time range perspective. They can further analyze if this statement has been costly or has been performing better, or if the SQL statement needs any improvisation. Now Foglight also comes with a great feature called as compare, where the DBAs or the database administrators can compare the performance between the production and the test environments as well. Now compare between these two instances or compare between these two time slices. Now to compare these instances of dimensions, first select a SQL statements tree. Use the compare option here. You can see in this example. Let's try to compare the results based on the workload and compare the same time range starting on a specific date. So you can click on compare. Now the comparison statistics which are displayed on the right hand side, it will give you a very good perspective on the instance performance between these two different dates. Similarly, there is another dimension that could be compared as well. For example, the comparison results can be based on workload, on the CPU, the user, IO application, and some of the other things. Another common example would be to compare the configuration between these two instances or between the production and the UA environment. So finally, whatever the overall goal of a database administrator would also be to tune the database performance. Now Foglight comes with multiple of these advisories, and this way we can also see the overview of what we have been selected. Now you can click on these advisories to go to the advisory section. For this specific instance, let's say there is one action plan. So when I select this advisory, I can get a description of the problem, the analysis of the data collected, the perspective to investigate the problems, and further Foglight can give you recommendation and actionable steps in order so that you can improve the performance as well. To summarize, if you have to summarize, Foglight for cross-platform database will give you a kind of a single pane view for the database monitoring and management, and it will also provide deep drill downs and multidimensional diagnostic capabilities as well. Right. So here we have covered how to perform the database health check, including how to investigating the blocking log issues, how do you the SQL statements which are causing excessive IO activity. At the same time, we have tried to understood how the correlating performance degradations are working in the database changes, understanding the execution plans, identifying the performance issues due to execution plans and changes.